Hi everyone, my name is Nenad, and first of all I would like to thank Startit and Tesla Nation for having me tonight. I would like to use the opportunity to share my experience in New York, living and working, and talk a little bit about developing successful businesses there, and especially talk about cultural differences that I saw, and to share all of those lessons that actually helped me succeed. So I would start with a small intro about everything that about my path. I moved to New York about 8 years ago, right? I finished studies in Serbia, and as I was unable to find a job that would really make me happy and kind of follow my ambitions, I moved to New York. My sister was there, and she actually helped me score the first job. And I started working as an accountant in a moving company in New York. It was a very new thing for me. It was a type of job I never had before, and there were so many things that I had to learn. And as I progressed, I took more and more responsibilities, and kind of soon oversaw all of the financials in the company. Then I moved to corporate because that was really at the time my ambition, and that was probably my first real experience with clients, right? I was employed by JLL. They're the biggest real estate company, one of the biggest real estate companies in the world. And what made them so specific is that other large corporations actually outsource project management services from them. So my team actually acted as a owner's representative. And that would mean that we would manage all of the projects in behalf of JP Morgan Chase. We would take their money and pretty much do everything for them. So that was extremely complex in regards to client relations. And throughout the presentation, I will talk more about some specific moments that happened. I was there for a couple of years. Of course, I advanced, and one day I met my friend from childhood in Belgrade, and we actually spoke about opening a company and going into a business world together. That was Nicola. And we actually started our first digital marketing company with Dumbo as one of our first clients. And I worked about 2 years simultaneously, and then finally I quit my job in corporate and kind of dedicated all of my time and energy to small business. So now we can actually go step by step, and I would like to use all of these elements of my career path to kind of talk about some specific moments that served as very valuable lessons for me. So let's go to the next slide, please. So probably my first impression when I moved to New York was work-life balance. You know, when I finished college, I thought that 40 hours a week is pretty normal and common thing. But even in the moving company, I realized that most of the people are expected to work over 70 hours a week. And at the time, that was shocking for me. But then after, when I met a lot of people from banking, I learned that they actually work over 100 hours a week. And that was something I never thought about. That was really the first lesson for me, and that the priority in New York is probably career and money making. When it comes to the price, I learned that people are really ready to pay any price. Some people do it for a specific amount of time, so they can invest into their future. But some people actually choose to have it as the way of their lives. And that was first big lesson. It's very connected to realistic and unrealistic goals. As I said, my primary goal was to go into corporate because I always thought that's kind of the peak of the knowledge and kind of the highest complexity of business I could actually have. And when I spoke with people that I met and I told them what are my goals, they would usually tell me it's impossible. Their feedback would be, hey, you got a college degree in Serbia, you do not have any relevant experience in the States, and you do not have any peers in corporate that would actually recommend you. Obviously, that was not accurate. What really happened is that I had some disadvantages, like all of us do, and that it simply took me a little bit more time and resources than it would take for someone else. I got into corporate. I got promotions even faster than some of my peers that got Ivy League degrees in the States. And the lesson here is that you shouldn't really ask anyone. You should think about what you want to achieve. And then it all comes down to the amount of resources and time that you actually need. That's something I used in my career even afterwards. When I spoke about business goals, when I spoke about running a business and doing a full-time job in corporate at the same time, I would often hear it's impossible, but I did it for almost 2 years and I was fairly successful in both. And let's go back for a second. When it comes to new coordinate systems, the thing is that we all position ourselves on the axis, you know, how successful is it possible to get and where do you actually stand? When it comes to New York, I changed this coordinate system so many times. What I consider to be a very high achievement changed dramatically, and it changed a couple of times. And when it comes to measuring how high is that ladder and like what is the real coordinate system, it's very difficult to say. Even today, I'm changing it really frequently, and I think that is one of the biggest lessons in New York. No matter how high you get, there is someone 10 times more successful than you. So I will talk a little bit about my employment just because many people think that being employed and being an entrepreneur is much different, and that you need different skill sets and that you need to do stuff in a different way. I wouldn't really agree. I think that some of the biggest lessons I had were actually from the days of employment, so I will touch some of these now and some of them a little bit later. So language and subculture finesse is something that we will talk the most about. How to greet people, you know, by intuition, you would often shake hands or hug someone or do anything of that nature. But in US, that doesn't have to be the case. I will tell you one anecdote. Like in corporate, I would work with the same people always. And when I would come across someone, they would say, hey, Nenad, how are you today? And I would say, hey, I'm fine. But then I would realize that that person already went. They walked away. They didn't even expect me to give an answer, and they obviously did not wait to listen to my answer. And that's 100% normal. And those are some phrases, that's some small talk that you simply become used to do. How to ask questions, how to give feedback. In Serbia, we tend to be very direct. I would say that in America, communication is much more layered, that you always start with something positive. So even if there's something I don't really like, I would say, that was an amazing question. Let me tackle that. And I might not even think that that was a pretty smart question, right? I would say, thank you for doing XYZ. It was amazing. And I would like also to mention, like, you would always wrap up things that you want to say. Joking, I will give some good examples later. I learned how to be very careful with jokes. Jokes can make very, very awkward situations. The value of money, obviously, when you go to New York, everything is completely different. I remember at the time, our first client actually helped us finance a project, and they gave us like $2,000. We thought that's so much money, and then I don't know how many months later we learned that brought them a couple of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that's also a little bit about coordinate systems. Let's see what would also be interesting here. Yeah, self-advocating and selling results was a huge, huge cultural difference. It's 100% normal to send a weekly email to your manager and say what you achieved. It's 100% normal that you self-advocate yourself in evaluations and even prize yourself. And it's 100% normal to even exaggerate a little bit. So that's something I had to use a lot. Using problems to create advantage, that's something that we always do. But I would actually like to hold here for a second, just talk about this one. When I was in corporate, there was a huge, huge, huge mess up in one of my projects that are managed. And long story short, there was a chaos in the airport. Like there was police, there were like the airport management and whatnot. We messed up the project. But what I did successfully there is that I managed to communicate well, both with the airport and with the client. And the whole situation ended up with the airport sending a very nice email to the client saying, hey, we like how everything was managed and how everything was communicated, although it was a very messy situation. So learning to find those silver linings, learning how to use problems to show some expertise is something I learned and used a lot. We can actually go to the next slide because I will mention many of these things throughout others. Applying corporate experience to small businesses is very aligned with what I spoke before. Integrating business culture is probably the biggest one of those, because if you're client-facing, you always want to do things that have the highest probability of being successful. So tone of voice, my peers would tell me always do 30% of your normal voice, because that would usually in the stage show some kind of an authority, and it would show confidence. Doing some small talk, asking people, hey, how was your day today? How's everything with your business? Are just some of the phrases that kind of become normal to you, which are very, very useful even in small business. Ability to listen, really in a way that I learned that people are so different in US, and that I kind of needed to go from the point where I need to learn more about them. So listen their tone of voice. Listen, look for those subtle messages in their communication and kind of see how you can adjust your tone of voice and what you speak to what you actually heard. Remaining calm and respectful was probably one of the lessons I utilized the most. Especially in Serbia, we tend to be a little bit more aggressive with our approach, with our tone of voice and even body language. And in US, that can be understood wrong very often. Regardless of how situation is stressful, regardless of how your views might be different from the views of someone else, remaining 100% calm and respectful was extremely important for me, and it helped me win so many arguments. I had situations where clients would call me and literally yell at me and even say some bad words, where I would reply back with, I 100% understand how you feel. Let me please address concerns that you have. That's something that you need to learn, and being emotionally distanced from the event is something which I learned in corporate and then applied everywhere else. Being aware of differences, I would say the biggest difference between corporate and small businesses is that in corporate, I was always layering communication. You know, it would take me time to come to the point just because I would need to make sure that the communication is already going well, that I kind of said something nice, and that I found the right words to deliver the message that I want, the same way I'm doing right now. While in the small business, you know, it really depends on your peers. You might have people who simply like to be direct. My business partners love doing that. And then I kind of need to stop and say, Nenad, just say what you need to say. So something to think about a lot. Let's go to the next slide. So our first client is a very good example of subculture and the importance of it in New York. He was actually from Israel. He was an immigrant who had a very difficult path in America. And he helped me personally a lot. He helped my sister a lot. And even in the end, when we made our company, he was the one to support us. And then by intuition, I would always say he supported us because I was an amazing employee. I did great stuff for him. But I think that we actually managed to make a connection, that we actually identified each other with another one, and that I respected his ways from the day one. And when I asked him help, I actually said, hey, Elior, I know that you were in my shoes. This is what would mean a lot to me. And creating that connection was essential, in my opinion, for everything that came after. So that's why I said listen a lot, ask a lot, because you can then learn a lot about your peers, and you might even be surprised about the similarities between yourself and your peer. Was it an exception? It's hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. I would say in corporate, the communication tends to be more formal, so it's very difficult to learn about people. But again, we need to keep in mind that New York is an extremely, extremely diverse environment. We like to say that everyone comes from somewhere. So, you know, in the essence, everyone struggles, everyone fights. Most of the people had difficult paths themselves, so you can actually identify it with many of them, really. And that's, I think, what makes everyone in New York, in a way, similar. They all look for success, they're all ready to struggle, and they all understand the value of hard work and kind of being honest about it. To see America, you have to leave New York. This is something I heard a lot, especially in my private life, you know. America is so diverse. New York is kind of a special place because I read the fact that there are more than 300 languages being spoken in New York. That's huge. That's amazing. You pretty much have every single nationality in New York. If you wanted to try all of the cuisines in New York, you probably would need to spend a couple of years and go to a restaurant pretty much every single night. But that doesn't necessarily apply to the whole to all of the states. So, first of all, being multicultural and very diverse is what makes it so unique. It's what makes New York a place where so many people want to go, where so many people want to spend their lives. But if you go, especially, let's say, to the South, you might come across a very, very strong society, very strong religion. I would even say a little bit of resistance to those like cultural changes that are happening. Highly liberal society, I was kind of trapped for some time with the thought that US is highly liberal in general. That's very debatable. You have places of US where religion is everything, where family is everything, that you have some certain values that are kind of unquestionable. So it's something that needs to be explored, something that needs to be very careful about. And you can especially see the differences between the East Coast, the West Coast being in a way similar to East Coast, and then Central America, and then even North and South. So New York, yep, highly liberal, not all of it. Huge capital and money movement, again, very specific to New York, especially when it comes to money movement. That's the core of capitalism. When we needed to get clients in New York, when we wanted to raise our prices, we would always be able to find clients. That wasn't really the case in some smaller places. And that's something to keep in mind. What is the standard of living in some Ohio? What is the standard of living in San Francisco? And these two are something that I mentioned before: career as the measure of success, and second to none, pace of life. Why was it so important to me? Well, when it comes to building relations, you know, when I spoke to clients in Texas, I would slow down. I would really ask them, hey, how's everything? How's your family? These are difficult times. Is everything fine with them? Just slowing down, kind of talking about some things which are not business related, and then quickly connecting that intro to the topic of your conversation. That applies a lot to private life as well. I mean, if you want to build connections, especially if you want to do it in a meaningful way, you know, in New York, you would spend a lot of time in restaurants and whatnot. In the South, you might do some social activities that would actually connect you to your peers. And we can go to the next slide. I would really like to talk a little bit about networking. So I will actually use this slide for that. So let's go step by step. Positioning during the sales, this is, I think, something that applies to many markets, but especially to America, because everyone is there to succeed, right? And everyone is looking how to get advantage. And when I was positioning myself during the sales, my first point was, what do you actually need from me? Like, what is your goal? Why do you sit and talk with me? And then, based on that understanding, based on listening, I would actually be able to show authority and kind of connect what I'm doing with something that my peer needs it, with something that my peer needs. And this is also a very cultural thing. I would always offer guidance in a way that you never want to do power play in US. I would always position myself as a guide to someone who is the hero of the story. So I would ask, hey, what are you looking to achieve? I would position myself as someone who has knowledge and say, I will help you achieve that. I wouldn't say, like, I will do it for you, although we would actually be the ones to create their websites, their digital marketing strategies, or whatnot. Why did I call this slide important of perception? I learned that in the States, perception is everything. If someone thinks that you're an expert, then you are an expert. I wouldn't say you need to fake it, but most of the clients that walked away from us had the best results. They simply had the perception that they shouldn't be paying for our services. And some of the clients that didn't have best results stayed with us for many years just because they did have the perception of being successful. And it really came down to statistics. You always have 5 to 10% of people who will not understand it well. I had clients who would say that they're losing money, although I would be able to prove them that they're generating 10x on what they're actually paying to us. They would yell to us. And that's something that happened. Why did I want to talk about networking? Well, especially about this fake it until you make it. I think it's very wrong. I would say fake it until you have it, because if you work with US, you need to develop. I don't believe in, building relations just for the sake of building it. When I was especially in corporate, I know my peers would invite me to Mets games. It's baseball. I went there once and I got bored as hell. Like, I just didn't understand the game. And I was kind of expected to do it all of the time just because I was explained that networking is super important. I didn't like it. Like, when I wanted to network, I would ask my peers or my supervisors, hey, can we sit and talk about my career? Can we sit and talk about business? I would always try to make it meaningful. And my best friend and today's partner, Nicola, is the person I knew for my whole of my life and whom I worked with before we actually went into business together. We went out so many times together, but what mattered the most was actually testing our capabilities and testing our logic and testing our moral values through some meaningful things. So by all means, I would say build soft skills to build relations. I was used to read a lot, especially psychology. I did psychotherapy for a while just to develop my soft skills. And I watched TED Talks just for the sake of listening to the intonation of speakers, just for the sake of watching their body language and kind of absorbing it. Building knowledge all of the time and not being shy, saying, I will get back to you about this. I will talk to my peers and kind of get back to you with more information. Healthy process to respond to client needs. Again, absolutely, we identified what is most important for clients' perception. If we would send them monthly reports with some progress charts that they wouldn't even look at, they would have the perception that they have full control over projects and that they're actually being successful. So that's, again, very connected to listening to client needs and kind of putting yourself into their shoes. Some general rules I applied. I will actually go into don'ts because those are very easy. Joke if unsure if it's appropriate. So this is a very good anecdote. I worked with a colleague for about 3 years in corporate. She was a girl, right, of my age. And she told me, and she was smiling, like, hey, I'm working out for a while and I don't see any results. And I kind of said, yeah, women often take selfies in the gym and, it happens. And suddenly she changed completely her facial expression and said, Nenad, that's so sexist of you. I was shocked. From this standpoint, I would call that comment a little bit sexist, but just because I worked with Americans for so long, so joking, in my opinion, is something to be extremely, extremely careful about, because there's a huge cultural difference playing into that. Knock-knock jokes are funny in America. Being invasive or overly aggressive, I cannot stress this enough. I went to South Carolina once with my friends, and some neighbors kind of looked at us like, listen to what we speak. We spoke mostly in English, but we also spoke a little bit of Serbian. And then a few months later, I learned that they said to my sister, oh my God, I was a little bit scared. I told to my wife not to speak to them. I was again shocked. It was really about our tone of voice. It was about our body language. And that's something that is dramatically different. And now when I spend most of my time in Serbia, many of my friends would tell me that I'm too polite, that I'm too gentle. I would call a cab and say, hey, how are you? Can I please get the cab? And they would be like, what are you doing? So absolutely do not be invasive. Do not be overly aggressive. Do not talk bad about literally anyone, because they tend to take things very personally and you just don't want to go there. Again, personal topics, I'm connecting it with US being liberal. Don't ask someone if they have a boyfriend or girlfriend. You can go in very sensitive topics. I worked with people for 3 years, and on every single lunch, we would talk about weather, about sports, and about the food. And that was 100% normal. That's what they wanted to speak about, just because personal topics are personal. Talking about things you don't know about, same thing. Once you harm your reputation, really, it's done. In Serbia, we are kind of used to be experts about everything. In US, I think it's much more about being specialized, about admitting what you don't know, and paying someone else to do a portion of job that you don't know. And that's a huge, huge difference that will people actually respect. Whenever I said, even in digital marketing, like, hey, I don't know what was Google's update about. It was very complex. Let me consult with my team and see what we know, what we don't, what was revealed, what not. Clients would highly, highly appreciate it, while I could position myself as an expert and say, user experience is now the key. I would really never do that, or I would be very careful when saying something like that. So just some final thoughts for the end of this part of the presentation. I learned that we are very competitive in the US market, both as individuals and as companies. What I didn't agree with many of my peers who never left Serbia is the importance of cultural differences. And I think that's really the key. Once we manage to overcome cultural differences, once we manage to adapt to the conversation, once we manage not to talk about what is better and what is worse, and just admitting that people are different, that cultures are different, and that's perfectly fine, we will cross that main bridge, and we will be able to utilize our expertise, our knowledge, and our talents, which are very high. I love to say, I mean, it's a quotation actually, difficult times create strong people. We had many difficult times. We had many challenges. I believe we are in general very strong, very passionate, and we just need to work on delivering that in the best way possible to foreign markets. Did it matter I'm a foreigner with an accent? Yes, it did, just for me, just for my confidence. I thought it mattered. That's why I did. Once I realized that's not the key, that some other things are much more important, it stopped. It stopped mattering. It stopped being important. I'm still making mistakes when I talk. I still have a thick accent, but it did not stop me from being super successful in client relations, in sales, which are really fields that I wouldn't really say that I was overly qualified for. How difficult it was to adapt to subculture, I would just say I'm still adapting. It's very difficult. It's very fun as well. It's really nice to meet different cultures and kind of look through the eyes of other people. I think it makes all of us rich, but it's very difficult, and I think it's a lifelong journey that I'm very ready to accept. So that would be the end of this part of the conversation. We would make a small pause, and then we would continue speaking with Vukashi. So just a small break.
So, hey everyone, my name is Gushin. I'm one of the co-founders of Started and Tesla Nation, and I'd just like to thank you, Nenad, so much for taking the time to put together your thoughts and share with us many, I would say, important and useful insights on how to sort of, well, on the one hand, think about how we approach the American markets and, well, the people in the markets, the customers, the partners, and everyone, and how to act on those principles. So I've got a bunch of questions. I'm not sure that we're going to have time to cover all of them, but one thing I'm just curious. You know, looking at your signature there, which says Nenad Bjeloš. Did you change your name in the US?
No, not really. So I would have a nickname. People would often call me Ned, but I would say, you can call me Ned. My name is Nenad. So I didn't hide it in any way. When it comes to my last name, I would just say, hey, it's easier for you to call me by name, you know.
Cool.
And that would be fine.
Cool. I mean, I think that one of the folks who really, I feel, taught me a lot of things that I haven't heard before from other Tesla Nation ambassadors in the US. He has the same name as you, and he was like, you know, one of the first decisions that I made was, you know, I changed my name, and he changed it to Nash.
And people called me Nash.
But he was like, you know, if you don't change your name, you're leaving a bunch of money on the table. Did you ever think about it like that? I'm just curious.
I actually did, and we did use it in business. Some of our salespeople use stage names. It matters when you're opening a conversation. When you have a warm lead and you want to make an intro, that's when it matters. When you're in a position to already be a person of authority, where like your peer already has an interest, then it stops being important. So you need to look at what stage of sales process you actually are.
Okay, cool. So, I mean, this is something that I was thinking so much about. I mean, for folks with egos, which I may be one of those, you know, a name is something that's so personal and such a part of your identity. So I was thinking whether I should, you know, go by Wolf or something. But I still haven't, you know, I still haven't come to that line where I would need to make that decision. But I just wanted to sort of
actually make a small comment about that, because I had very interesting conversation. One of the people who taught me the most was my senior manager in corporate. So he kind of gave me an advice: "No, don't be so humble. Don't keep your head down." I was like, "What?" And he was like, "You need to be aware of the qualities that you actually have. And most of you who come from other countries have lack of self-esteem." And I think this is very connected to it. When you go to US, you have accent, you do not understand the culture well, you're kind of disadvantaged, and all of us, I mean, we have complexes. And then, you know, I think about my value because of my name, which is ridiculous. So I would just say, if it's practical to kind of have stage names when you have conversation openers for your sales, by all means do it, because if you call someone from Texas, he might hang up if he hears some weird name. But I mean, if I'm on a meeting with someone who wants to know about the digital marketing, my name is the last thing that he cares about. Or, I mean, they care about.
So that was really awesome. And the part that I sort of always, you know, put folks like yourself in like the hot seat is the, I'm going to say the dichotomy or the, you know, balance of humbleness and I'm not sure which word you used for self-allocation. I think that's how you put it. I like that. I feel like for myself, and this might be because I haven't been exposed to the culture in the US as much as, you know, could be optimal. I sort of struggled to find and understand the right balance between being humble and being assertive, or, you know, self-advocating. Some of the biggest cultural shocks for myself in the US are sort of in those two categories. On the one hand, everybody on the street is asking me how I am, and they do it, and it seems as if they really care, which is not something that I'm used to, even from people that I hang around with.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice, you know, and you're saying thank you for everything, you know. You know, if somebody moves, like, you know, on the street, and you just move just a little bit so they can pass more easily, you know, thank you. It's all thank you, excuse me, how are you, and so on, which is something that you mentioned. And actually, genuine niceness. I do really feel that there is genuine niceness, and I think that you also referred at that. But at the same time, I had the luck that I was a bit mentored by some of our folks in the US who I think have acclimated well to business culture there. And when I sort of practiced my pitches with them, they were like, "You wuss, why are you being so nice? You are never gonna make it. You cannot say, well, we are somewhat successful, we are kind of good." You have to go out there and tell, yeah, we are the best in this, and these are the reasons why, and so on. I'm kind of
debatable.
So might be debatable. However, I just have to say this to you. Once I may have gone too far, and I may have made a sort of too hard of an a stupid example, really. You know, you're never gonna say we're the best in the world. However, projecting that sort of confidence and, you know, presenting yourself in the best way possible without crossing the line of actually telling lies, seemed to me that works very well, and it did work very well for me, and I almost see that it works for other folks as well when they do that. So I've talked for too long, but the balance between humble and assertive, and how do you combine those two, at least on the surface, contradictory traits?
Excellent point. It's difficult. Why I smiled and I almost interrupted you when you made the slide. I think at one point you had expert in digital marketing. I never call myself expert in digital marketing. I would say digital marketing professional. That kind of answers your question. I didn't say this before so explicitly, but in US, everyone wears masks, 100%. You need, I was always trying to be socially intelligent and kind of judge every situation and every person for itself. And when I need to be more humble, when I need to be more aggressive. I also said, fake it until you have to. And you have short and long-term goals. If I said I'm digital marketing expert, and then Google update hits, and weird stuff happens, you'll be like, okay, you're an expert. How did it happen? But I can say I'm a digital marketing professional that follows all of the trends in the market, that follows everything that's going on, and that does everything that carries the highest probability of you being successful. That's building long-term confidence. I might lose some of the clients in the sales process because I didn't say, I'm the best, you're going to be first on Google. But looking at the long run, I will have much better retention rate, and I will have much higher client satisfaction. And that was one of the cores of our business. We have more than 90% retention rate, about 90 plus clients now, simply staying with us for a very long time. And one of the bases of our growth was actually upselling, getting new projects from them and getting projects from their peers, because no one ever walked away by saying, you promised me this. I had a feeling that you will achieve X, Y, Z. So short and long-term goals, and really depending who you talk to. If I were to pitch to an investor, of course, I would kind of try to be a little bit more confident, even play a little bit with numbers, what like most of the startups do. But it depends on situation.
Super, and perhaps one of the reasons that I'm so almost obsessed with this question is that I feel like perhaps there was a that we might have some cultural deficiencies in terms of being sort of trained in family or in school, that, you know, if you're being you know, too assertive or too you know, well, I'm gonna say proud of your achievements or talents, that it's somehow not nice. Whereas I have gotten the impression that in the US, you know, you need to turn up a notch on that in order to be well recognized, because perhaps there's so much more competition there, and, you know, everybody is saying they're good, so you have to play that game. Could you tell me, what did you mean by saying that folks in the US have masks? It almost sounds like they're not being, you know, sincere in interactions with you.
Let me put it this way. When I came back to Serbia, my friends would tell me I'm fake. Simple as that. People I knew for a very long time, they would tell me your facial expressions are different. You are fake. You're later in conversation. You're not sincere. And I was like, I didn't feel that way. Like, I love them. I care about them. Like, I'm the same person. Even my mom told me that. My mom told me I'm not the same person. Why? Because I learned how to wear masks in US, and that was necessary for my success. People are not sincere. People are one thing in the business environment, another thing in private life. And that's why I said, do not go into personal topics. Do not joke. You have no idea what is behind. And it's very difficult to kind of penetrate that surface and see what's actually going on. You said like people are very nice on the street. I also gave you an example. They will not wait to hear your answer because that's a mask. How are you? How's everything? I hope everything is great. Sometimes I don't even listen to what you're responding. So I'm not saying they do not care about you. I'm just saying they have some social norms, some things that they learned, some elements of social interference, which are simply, you know, there. And you kind of need to go with it.
I'm going to say it's refreshing, even though it might be abrasive to someone to say that people are insincere. However, if we, you know, look at the hard facts of how life and business are, and probably not just in the US, that's like the most logical and only logical conclusion in many situations. I mean, I remember in many situations like you know, folks saying to each other, "How are you?" and the response is, "How are you?"
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. No, it's weird and intriguing to me, at least. So one thing that really sort of caught my eye, and this is something that you mentioned at the start of your talk, is that you were really I'm gonna say you were really well surprised by the work ethic in the US. You mentioned that people work 70 hours a week, which is like almost double what is normal, considered normal, at least in Serbia. And what can an entrepreneur or let's say an ambitious professional from Serbia do with that information? In what way can you use that? And when I say use that, I mean in your thinking, in your communication. How do you, since it's obviously not a thing here, how do you position yourself best for success in an environment that is so different in the way that they perceive the culture of work?
It's adorable. I'm really proud I managed to do that. Like that in that moving company, I didn't work 70 hours a week. I worked 50. I literally told my boss that on Saturday I'm ready to come to work, but I would work until 1. But I will vouch that every single thing that he asked me to do will be done. I asked him like to quantify what needs to be done, and just to measure my success that way. I think there is also, people kind of exaggerate a little bit, especially in banking and some corporate world. You know, they would stay 15 hours in the office and actually work for 11 just to show their bosses how committed they are. I don't think that's the best approach. So there is definitely a balance to be made. You cannot really expect to work 40 hours a week, never work weekends, never work evenings, if you really want to be competitive in the US market. But again, by increasing your efficiency, by clearly communicating the goals and deliverables, I think you can actually balance it, especially if you own a company, because you do not have to report to anyone except your clients. When it comes to corporate, when you have to report to a manager, then it becomes more difficult. But again, it's about communicating. Even in corporate, I didn't work more than like 50 hours a week. I remember like first time I got promoted to project manager, I walked in the office, people were like so stressed, like, you know, almost shaking. Like I was like, wow, I will die working here. And everything was fine. Like I managed like to work normal working hours. And as I said, like I even got promoted faster than some of those people who kind of showed they work like massive hours.
And let's say if someone is trying to you know, start and develop business from Serbia with clients in the US,
Okay.
Are there any signals that you should be sending? You mentioned that communication is important. If those folks are you know, very driven by their work and very committed to that, should you sort of in advance address their potential objections or concerns regarding your work culture? I'm not saying that you necessarily need to, you know, adopt their work ethic, but is there some tip that you could share on how you could, you know, sort of in advance let those folks know, yeah, you're not going to be working with lazy ass people who will not be able to get to your standard work. If there are not any tips, I don't want to press you too much.
There are some tips. First of all, I would like to connect this with being humble and being like overly like, you know, proud of yourself. Facts, numbers, especially with clients, presenting with facts, presenting with numbers, presenting with reports that talks much more than any compliment you would give to yourself or anyone else. When you work with US market, obviously you need to adapt to working hours. You have to expect to work in evenings. That's the price to pay. And then wearing masks. If I see that someone is very like, someone is a micromanager, I will tell them we are here for you 24/7. But I will do everything with setting up processes to prevent them reaching out. How do I mean? Especially in corporate, I had one person, she was on the client side, very high position, kind of overseeing all the budgets. She was the biggest micromanager that existed. She would call at 6 a.m., check what's going on with the project and stuff like that. Be a step ahead. I would send her daily reports. This is what happened. This is what we expect to happen tomorrow. Build that confidence. Tell her, hey, I'm here anytime you need me. That's what she's not. It was a lady. She didn't hear often, and then she didn't have a need to actually reach out to me all the time because I understood where she comes from, and that's why I said listen, and then adapt to it. Like you do not want to confront someone. Weekends. I mean, especially in digital marketing, we maintain people's websites. Our website can go down. And yes, I will say, this is my personal cell. If something is urgent, reach out. And I will respond on weekends if something happens. So, you know, making a balance. But again, setting up processes is the key to prevent situations where you would actually have that gap.
Well, the thing that you just, that example, you know, sometimes examples can be such a great sort of learning device. I remember earlier that you mentioned that for some clients, when you understood that it will be beneficial to both yourself and themselves, that you send them like a weekly or a monthly report, that makes sense. But this makes even more sense because you put it in a story.
Let's put it in a context even more, because that was a tip I got from very senior manager in my company. Let me say two things which will be very valuable. 3 months after I joined corporate, I asked him, hey, why did you hire me? Like, we had good enough relationship. I wanted to know. He said, in the first 2 minutes, I knew I'm going to hire you. I looked how you folded your coat, and I looked how you looked each one of us in the eyes when you talked. Just to back up everything I spoke about today, there were like hundreds of people who applied even from Ivy League. Where I'm going with that, he was a few levels above me. So I asked him, like, how do I get a promotion? Like, we kind of had a relationship. He told me, send weekly emails to your manager. Tell them what you achieved. I was like, wow. He said, do it. I did for a while. I didn't get the promotion. I consulted with him again. He said, yeah, it's normal that your manager does not want to promote you because you're so valuable to them. And I was like, what do I do? Be free to say, can I continue this dialogue with the manager above? I was again shocked. How can you even say that? But that kind of talks about self-advocating, but again, choosing right words, like, can I continue this dialogue? It's just like the way he phrased it, like I will remember it for my whole life. You can wrap up pretty much everything, but there's so many, you know, layers and details that you need to pay attention to.
There's literally a book that could and should and will be actually written within the scope of this Destination project on those simple tips that can make or break a situation. Like, you know, what you just said, can I continue this dialogue with the next level, is so much better than I hate you because you hate me and I want to talk to your boss.
And again, tone of voice, body language you spoke. If you're not invited, we just love to continue this dialogue if it's fine with you. Of course, they will say it's fine.
Of course, they will say it's fine. One tip, one advice that I got. I was talking to this guy, and I said, honestly, I would say, and he said, stop right there. Never again will you say honestly, because that means that everything you said before is false. I was like, okay, when you put it like that, it kind of does. He said, you can say, if I may be frank, even though the word means essentially absolutely the same. The difference in those fine notes is such a huge difference. So one thing that is also, well, that was somehow something I got by listening to your presentation, but now I sort of think even more. So if in some situations you can send weekly updates or monthly updates, and that will be great for you, and in other ones that will be not great for you, because if I remember correctly, one of your clients to whom you were sending reports left you. I may have misunderstood that, but for those of us with less experience, perhaps even in business or especially in doing business in GS, how do you see with whom you sort of make the connection so that you report to them? How do you judge their character and their expectations, and then decide, okay, these folks will be getting one report in the morning, one in the afternoon, and these won't be getting any? If that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. So this question actually has a few elements to it. When it comes to clients and reporting, you know, you cannot communicate too much. What I would stress is deliver information. Don't deliver your interpretations. So even if I sent weekly reports to them with the stuff that we did, it wouldn't harm. They would just, like, you know, ignore the email, and that's pretty much it. You cannot really make damage that way. When it comes to people, that's why I said fake it till you have to. Developing those soft skills and kind of understanding who is a micromanager, who is not, is something that really comes with experience. I would always say it will never harm you to directly communicate results and to directly communicate information in some normal dynamics. I mean, sending monthly reports is always fine. Like, I really cannot see a situation in which that's not okay. sending daily reports would be something very rare, and only in a situation where you think that someone is a micromanager that you depend on and where you want to kind of prevent issues happening. So those people that left us, they didn't leave us because we sent reports or something. It's just that it was their perception. If I had to say to our client manager what he should have done differently, I would say he should have spoke with them more frequently instead of sending reports, because then he would actually sense by the tone of voice and his expressions and all that, how does he actually feel, and then he would actually be able to tackle some problems that he probably wasn't aware of. Like maybe their business was not going well, or their wife left them and took some money or something like that.
There's a like this wall of culture shock between folks in Serbia and doing business in the US, and I think you even sort of mentioned it explicitly when you were telling about how your friends and your family interpreted that. So sometimes folks in Serbia say when they talk to folks in the US who are being perhaps who are layering their communication, who are perhaps not being as direct as somebody in Serbia is being, who are making small talk, even though you wouldn't make small talk with that person unless you wanted to do business with them. And sometimes folks say that's lying, that is wrong. What do you think about that? I mean, they told to you that you have become fake.
Yeah, well, exactly what I said before. We need to learn that there is not good and bad thing. There are different things. It's, there is an ocean between us. Of course, their culture is completely different. They might call us weird, if we wanted to have that kind of a conversation. So just understanding that that's something that they learn from their childhood. I mean, that's 100% normal for them. When they speak to their parents, they would raise their voice. They would be overly confident. Parents would tell them, amazing job for something which, is for you is completely normal. So it's a part of the culture, just no hard feelings about it. That's adapting, and that's learning, and that's leaving your ego on the side. Like, your ways are not the best ways. Your ways are simply your ways. There are so many different ones, and that's it.
That's a really, really important lesson, I think, for all of us to learn, that there's this saying in Latin, you don't discuss about tastes. We could say you don't discuss about cultures. If that's a culture that is said in one way, you can like it or you cannot, but if you want to do business with those folks, you need to accept it, and there's no wrong or right.
And again, look for silver lining. Like, even if you don't like it, what do you want to achieve? You want to have a good relationship, whether it's a friend or a business partner or whatever. Like, make him feel comfortable. Like, it's a fair thing to do. Like, it's not being a fake. It's just like adapting yourself a little bit. Let's call it that way.
Super. So we have a couple of questions that have come in the meantime. So I would say that, we can see this first one. How much time has passed till you got your first job? I sort of remember that. I think that I remembered one of your jobs was very, very basic. Perhaps even in the service industry.
Yep.
I'm not sure whether this question would cover that, but I'm going to let you answer that.
But that's good you mentioned it. I worked as a waiter for 6 months or so. So that goes hand by hand with everything we spoke. That's New York. You fight to survive. I never had a roommate in New York again, connecting to what is doable, what is not. Yes, I was a waiter while I was looking for the corporate job, just in between. No one ever refused me. That's very funny. I scored my first job. What was difficult for me is to get an interview. because, Serbian education and all that, I had to adjust my resume a little bit. I had to send it to many addresses. I actually had an Excel spreadsheet. I believe it was about 70 applications that I made. And Jalal was my first in-person interview, and I got hired right away. So I didn't have too much experience with refusals, but I did have a lot of experience with simply, looking for a job like crazy and kind of applying for every single company. It makes sense.
Did they get back to you when you sent an application? Or
no, that was the biggest issue. Like, again, it's about learning. Like, what I learned is that they actually use softwares to select resumes. They would look for keywords and stuff like that. So many times your resume would simply not even go to inbox just because you do not have certain education or experience. That was difficult. So I had to learn how to adjust my resume. Often they would not even make a phone interview because they would look for specific education. Like, that was difficult. They usually wouldn't come back. That was kind of, unfortunate. I would love that they did it a little bit differently. So that's, again, putting your ego on the side. Yeah, it's painful. I have education. I work as a waiter. People don't respond to my applications. Like, keep trying. That's why I said, like, everything is possible. It's just about how much time and how much effort it takes, and everything is 100% doable.
And this might be a good introduction into a story, which I'm not sure whether I understood well, if you had alluded to it, but how did you get your first client?
So,
because that I'm not sure if that's harder or not.
Yeah, so I worked in Dumbo, and Nicola, my partner, actually did some...
Sorry, could you repeat for those folks who might have missed it? What is Dumbo?
So Dumbo Moving and Storage is the company in which I worked when I moved to New York, and that's the job my sister helped me get. So I was doing financials for them, and when he needed some web development, I actually recommended my friend Nicola in Serbia to help him out. He did it for a while, and then I left the company. A couple of years passed, and then when we decided to make a company, I actually approached him and said, "Hey, Lior, I'm trying to start my business the same way as you were doing before. Do you think that you can maybe give us your other companies to be managed and, to do web development for them and all that?" And that's where I said, like, cultural background, what did really matter for him. He gave us 2 of his other companies. Soon after, he recommended us to some of his peers. And I didn't say it, but it was in one of our slides. The most important thing are actually 2 things, and that is reliability and trust. While I worked with Dumbo, I managed all of his finances. I was authorized on all of his business accounts. I was a trustworthy person. Nicola did a lot of good things for him. And then he simply allowed us to use his brand, even to advertise and kind of use his reputation to approach other companies. So that helped a lot.
Was he like a co-owner, or did he just do it because he really liked the way that you worked?
He didn't have any financial interest in that. Like, we bootstrapped all of our businesses. We didn't have $1 of investments or anything like that. So we did a lot for his business. I mean, he benefited from us, but when it comes to supporting our business, I mean, he didn't necessarily have to do it. That was, in my opinion, based on relationship big part, and that's why I stressed perception a lot as well. Him particularly, I think, never understood that he probably made millions out of our work. I mean, he was the best positioned company in New York. He got like almost thousands of leads a month just based off our work. But simply, I also said respected him and his ways. He didn't look at that in that way, and that's perfectly fine. So I think that answers your question.
And that's a perfect introduction to the next question, which is something that I pose to all of our guests. you mentioned that in the U.S., or at least in New York, we can sort of limit ourselves to that geography because that's the primary topic of today's talk. Something along the lines of everybody is there to succeed.
Yep.
Which is an atmosphere that is quite intoxicating, and it's really great for ambitious people who experience it coming from other parts of the world where perhaps that vibe isn't there necessarily. And also, there's a lot of immigrants. There's a lot of hardworking folks like yourself who went there, who did a hell of a job, in delivering, in making sure that you're reliable, even though you had a thick accent, as you put it, it didn't stop you from being successful. And where I'm going with this is, are immigrants who are already established in the US good first clients for people from outside of the US? And the reason I'm asking this is that I've got some sort of anecdotal evidence that if you approach a small business owned by an immigrant, that there might be perhaps a bit less prejudice in working with you. Is this like? Does this feel
familiar?
Familiar, or at least
it feels familiar.
Yeah.
Honestly, many of our clients are owned by immigrants. To some part, it was the nature of the industry. In the moving and storage, many of the business owners are immigrants. So that's also about the target market. But yes, I did feel it a little bit easier to approach because it's a little bit easier to connect, especially if you make some meaningful relationships over the time. So yes, I mean, it makes it easier. I just wouldn't go into the trap of limiting yourself, because I don't think it's much more difficult to approach an American-owned company. I mean, Americans are very open to doing business. Again, you said it yourself, everyone is there to succeed. If you prove that you will contribute to their success, they won't really care too much about other stuff. Of course, if you're able to respect all of those cultural finesses that we spoke about. So it's easier, just don't limit yourself.
Cool. I mean, what I actually had in mind there, which is great that you pointed out, is not to limit yourself. However, if you're like a business person who is like making first inroads into the U.S. markets, perhaps it might be I'm gonna say an easy win, but a perhaps slightly lower hanging fruit to start off with someone who is not necessarily a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, but a great point about not
There's
limiting
some
yourself.
debatable things. You can debate that people who are immigrants are more ready to take risks. So they are more ready to try like new solutions or explore like different possibilities just because of their character. So, it's a very debatable topic, but you definitely do have something there.
Awesome. So I think there was at least one more question that we could take. So perhaps, you mentioned that you needed to develop a lot of soft skills, and how I'm gonna interpret this question, and I hope that that's gonna be all right with Marco, is you mentioned a lot of how you need to be careful and stick to socially acceptable topics such as sports and food and the weather. And my question is, should entrepreneurs from Serbia who are interested in entering the US market be even more extra careful in 2022 as opposed to 2019?
So there's one advice I would like to give to pretty much anyone who's interested into working with America is travel to US as much as you can. Spend time there as much as you can. Listen to people, talk to people, just kind of feel it. listen, like kind of tell yourself, I'm going there to learn and observe, and, you know, put my ego on side, put my need to prove myself on the side, just so you kind of get used to those small things. I think that helps a lot. To answer your question directly, yes, COVID had a lot of influence on social well-being of all of us. There are many sensitive topics. There are many things that were politicized. So just don't go there. Like, don't be trapped. Like, you know, I would always say it was a difficult situation for all of us. I hope you and yours are healthy. You know, I might have my feelings about all of this, but I will never ever share it with my peer, client, or prospect.
Sounds like you're saying don't mention Trump. You know, in passing. I'm kidding. Let's stop right there.
Yeah.
We don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
There's a joke. If you want to like create a chaotic atmosphere at a Slava or something, you just mention a name of a politician.
Well, let me tell you an anecdote. I had a business meeting in corporate. It was like 60 of us. We did icebreakers. So, you know, junior people would be assigned to do icebreakers. And we had one of immigrant who wasn't so savvy about all of these things. And he said, okay, let's do icebreaker. Let's talk. What do we think will happen if Trump wins? And then I was like, wow. And, you know, the manager jumped and be like, no, we're not going to do that. Like,
yeah.
So that really happened.
Yeah. Politics is a definite no-no, I would think, globally.
Yeah. And also, just to interrupt you, Trump, like, we may laugh about it, but there's something they call silent majority. You never know what they think behind. Everyone wears masks. And they said, like, not every environment is liberal. Don't go in the trap to assume that your peer is liberal, that they accept stuff that you kind of think are normal. Very, very debatable. You will have people in America that will say that Trump is liberal in some ways, you know, that liberals are actually the ones that make society conservative. So those are very, very sensitive topics. So just stay away.
So the holy trinity of sports, food, and better. I think I think we can stick with that. That's probably good advice. Yeah, I mean, unless you get some mileage done.
Business, people love to talk about business.
Business is an obvious one, but it should be sort of
even stocks. That's also funny. Like, people love to talk about market stocks.
Yeah, that's something that is I feel poorly understood in Serbia. So I feel that we could slowly wrap our conversation up. You mentioned something along the lines of go to the US, be there in person as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I feel that's, I mean, obviously, I mean, I would think it's obviously a great piece of advice. And this is something that I personally benefited from quite a bit. You know, I went out there to the US to sort of, you know, see whether I would establish some relationship and whether they would evolve. And I had a tremendous amounts of luck that they indeed did. However, we have to take into account that not many folks are lucky that they can, you know, put together, you know, capital essentially for going there and, you know, making those connections in person.
Yeah.
And we, you know, it would probably send the wrong message that we're just, okay, if you can't afford that, that's not something that you should do. Is there any advice that you could share with entrepreneurs, you know, and professionals who like to engage that market, who might not, for any reason, either financial, administrative, or health reason, be able to go there?
Thank you so much for that question. Like, I would also like to send a message that you don't necessarily have to be in US to work with US market. I mean, you can open a company in Delaware even without legal residence in US. You can buy just call US, just call numbers, and, you know, do it that way. What you need to do, by all means, is approach yourself to the culture. If you cannot be there physically, do it in alternative ways. Some of the things that I personally did, although I was there in person, I loved TED Talks just because I can listen to Americans talking about things that they're passionate about. There are many great authors of books, psychology, especially Western psychology. There's so many books. Let's say just one recommendation, quick, Social and Emotional Intelligence by Goldman. Amazing author. Read it. It talks a lot about everything I spoke about. So just expose yourself. We live in 21st century. You can find so much material online. You can read so many great books, but again, get books in English. Get used to those finesses in the language. You know, listen to people speaking English. Try like to be in situations where you will speak English, you know, whether over the phone or with your peers. So there are definitely ways to do it, even without being physically present.
And in a way, that's a perfect sort of wrap up for this conversation. You know, one of the most important skills that you can and must invest is your command of the English language. Sometimes we take it for granted. And obviously, I mean, these are the only events that we do. I mean, even though we are both Serbian, our mother tongue is Serbian, and the folks who are watching this are also Serbian. But the reason why we want to do these events in English is because it's so important to sort of switch your sort of frequency to be able to converse and even think in that language.
Here's one tip: like we have most of our employees in Serbia, we use only English in Slack. That's it. Period.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I think I've heard that before.
We do it, I believe, for 2 years now, and simply all of the written communication is in English.
And how many folks is that in your company?
45, let's say.
Awesome.
And you know, some of them didn't have like such a good English. We said like it's perfectly fine to mistake. We're not here to judge. We don't care if you mistake. We just want you to get used to the language, and that's it. People. What was surprising to me personally is that people accepted it so well. People, I kind of feel even enjoyed it.
Awesome. So this is a good place as any to wrap up. Nenad, thank you so much for taking the time. And if any of the folks who have watched this live or will be watching this afterwards, feel free to reach out to us if you have any specific questions for Nenad and his experience and how perhaps some of the lessons he learned and shared with us could be perhaps broadened. Feel free to reach out, and we'll get back to you. And until next time, thanks so much to all of you, and we'll be having a new destination meetup soon enough. And that's it. Have a good one.
Awesome. Have a good one. Thank you.